God Almighty. Through your Holy Spirit, conceiving Christ the Son, Jesus our Savior. I believe in God our Father, I believe in Christ the Son, I believe in the Holy Spirit, our God is three in one. I believe in the resurrection, that we will rise again. For I believe in the name of Jesus. And our defender, suffered and crucified. Forgiveness is in you. Descended into darkness, you rose in glorious light. Forever seated high. I believe in God Father, I believe in Christ the Son, I believe in the Holy Spirit, our God is three in one. I believe in the resurrection, and we will rise again. Thank you for joining us this morning. Welcome to TAF, Triad Adventist Fellowship. If you're a visitor or a regular attender, welcome, and we're so glad to have you here. We have a couple more songs this morning in our morning worship, and feel free to please sing along with us. Our next one is It Is Well, so that's like a pretty familiar hymnal, but this has got a little different twist on it. So at first, if you want to just kind of listen and it's pretty easy to catch on. But if you just want to take a little bit to kind of catch where they're going with it, feel free, and then it'll just go on from there. So thank you very much for joining us, and please sing along. One more song this morning, Your Grace is Enough. This is the Chris Common version. I think we've done this one quite a bit here, so I should hear a lot of voices out there. Please bow with me in prayer this morning. Father God, thank you so much for gathering us here this morning. Thank you for lifting our praises and our voices to you, our loving and awesome God. Father, we pray for our leaders, and that there's just so much stuff going on right now, and that you would just give them guidance and wisdom, and just help everyone to get along. And please help us to hear the message that is about to take place. And when we leave here, just spread your good news in your light. In your name we pray. Amen.
What's going on, everybody?
Hey.
Good morning.
Morning.
Happy Sabbath. Good to see you guys out here. So I know we just prayed, but I'm going to pray again. Amen. So, here we go. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, God. Thank you so much for all the things you do for us and just all the ways you've blessed us. God, I just ask that you be with me right now as I give this message, Lord. I ask that it be your message. And Lord, if it's in your will and in your desire, I ask that somebody be touched today by this. God, I just ask you to remove all the bits and pieces of Luke that might get in the way, and help your Holy Spirit to come through. These things I pray in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. All right, guys. So, really quick. Hey, Julie, can you hit logo and then go to trouble? I mean, those are pretty cool. Logo. Now hit the trouble. Yeah. All right, so my sermon is titled Trouble. I figured, I don't know how about you guys, but it's been a crazy year. It's been crazy for the church. It's been crazy for me, personal life. Little insight into what's going on in my life right now. I am in the process of getting married, and that's crazy. Thank you. The real hero is Elizabeth. But anyways, there's just a lot going on. I felt called to talk about trouble. And so what I'm going to do, and it's going to be kind of quick, I'm not going to do some of these stories justice. If everything goes according to plan, we're going to have 9 stories. So it's 11:20. I want to get you guys out of here by 12, get you some food, but we're going to run through this. All right, so I'm going to start with a story about me. So there's 3 types of trouble, really, and I wanted to get to that first. The trouble that comes to you, trouble that you didn't look for, trouble just happens your way. We've all been a part of that. Also, trouble that is sent to test you, to find out what you're made of, and to see what happens, and how you respond to it. And then finally, there's trouble that you get yourself into. And so I'm going to talk about those 3, but first, we're going to open up and talk about trouble that comes to you. So I'm going to take you back a little bit. I had worked at Starbucks for about 5 years. I wasn't going anywhere with the company. I had great vision. I even went and got a business degree through them. And I will add a little bit of salt to that. I'm a little mad that they give out free college education now at Starbucks, because I had to pay. So I was a little early to that boat. Ended up having to pay for college, got a lot in debt. I wound up at this big engineering firm in Greensboro. It's called Corvo now. It was RF Micro Devices. Some of you guys might be aware of that. Some of you might work there. I don't know. So I got in as a temp, and the job I was doing, I had no idea what I was doing. They wanted me to do programming, and I'm a business major. So I had some familiarity with computers, but they sat down and like, look at all these lines of code, tell us what they mean, you know, and then I'm like, dude. And so I wound up being the guy who sorted the mail, and yes. I sorted the mail. I would look through documents and see if it sounded good, because believe it or not, engineering is a different language, and so somehow I acquired a gift to translate a little bit and make it sound okay to a layperson. Sorry, Mark. Anyways, it wasn't looking good. I realized that my contract was going to be up, so I used the business stuff that I had learned, and I just started being really bold. I walked into the offices of people whose job I might be interested in. So at the time, you know, I had a guy at Starbucks, and I was just talking with him, and he was like, you know what you would be great at, Luke? Project management. Spoilers. I wouldn't be good at project management. Just ask anybody who's done anything under me. I am kind of absent-minded, so I don't know how I did that. But he said you'd be good at project management. So I walked into every project manager's office, and I was like, hey, tell me about what you do. And they're like, man, this guy, I like you. And so, through a crazy situation of events, I became a project management person's understudy, right? And this is all as a temp worker. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is what God has in store for me. This is what God decided to give me. You know, this is how everything went. So everything was going great. We had this big contract, couple $1 million. They're letting me, fresh out of college, you know, work this contract. And I'm like, yes. I'm calling the engineers. I'm getting the parts where they need to be. I'm working with all these levels. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then Christmas came. And it's a weird thing they do at RF Micro. They basically shut down for 2 weeks for the most part, other than some of their fabrication facilities. But for the most part, the place is closed for 2 weeks around Christmas. So I come back from Christmas, I'm like, yeah, Samsung, I sold a part or whatever, you know. And a weird thing happened. Work stopped coming to me. Work stopped coming to my desk. See, at that time, they were going through a merger with a company called TriQuint. TriQuint had a lot of government contracts. And see, there's this weird thing about government contracts. You can't subcontract people when you have government contracts. So I didn't know this, but as soon as TriQuint merged with RF Micro to become Corvo, I was already out of a job. And so I was kind of weirded out. You know, I had done everything I could think of to do that was right, and ultimately that wound up with me just not having any work. And God blessed, and other things opened up. But my point is that was trouble I wasn't looking for. Everything looked good. Everything seemed great. And I was blindsided. I had done everything right, and it completely fell over. Well, it turns out that I'm not the only person that things like that happen to. I go to the story in the Bible, and I don't know if you're familiar with the story. I'm actually going to read this story because it's kind of short. There's other stories I will not be reading because there are several chapters. You can thank me later. So this story is about Jesus calming the storm. You can find that in your Bibles in Mark 4, 35 through 41. I think I'm reading out of the NIV. I'm not 100%, but here we go. Verse 35. The day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." So, kind of piggybacking off of Chaplain Taylor, I don't know if you guys have heard his sermon series on storms. Very powerful. If you ever get a chance, talk to him about it. He's here sometimes. But there's something that is critically important in this. So you have this storm going on. And obviously, you're going to see some stuff as I talk. One of my pillars of importance is to humanize people in the Bible. People in the Bible were people. I think it's very unfair to look at the disciples as kind of a myth or something, and we have a tendency to do that, maybe without even realizing it. Sorry, people in the Bible study, you're hearing this again. But people in the Bible are people. You see a snapshot of their life. Now imagine yourself if someone took a snapshot of a random part in your life, and they judged your entire existence off of that snapshot. Wouldn't really be fair, would it? So these disciples are people. Now these people who happen to be disciples of Jesus are scared out of their mind. Now what did they do for a living? They were fishermen. This is not a weird situation for them. This is not a situation they've never been in before. They know the danger. They are the people who would understand when their life was in danger. Cutscene, go over to Jesus, who is asleep on a cushion as these seasoned sailors are preparing to die. Chaplain Taylor's point was this: the best thing the disciples could have done is gone and laid next to Jesus, because, hey, if the Lord and Creator of all things is lying there asleep, completely relaxed, what business do we have being scared? But I ask you as humans to imagine and understand that that wasn't the situation. Their humanity took over at that point. And many times in our own lives, our humanity takes over. So even though the correct answer might have been to lay next to Jesus and just trust, we're all human. When the winds and the waves come, do you really just go lay down and say, Jesus, I know you got this? Not usually. Usually we wait until we've done everything on the boat we could do possible to save ourselves. And then, after we can do no more, the water's coming in, we are terrified. That's when we go wake up the sleeping Savior of the world and ask for help. And he rebukes them. Okay, another story. How many of you are familiar with the story of Esther? Anybody? All right, well, I'm going to give you the cliff notes. So you have this girl who's living with Mordecai, and through a series of events, she winds up being some orphan child. I think Mordecai was her uncle, if I'm correct. And she winds up in the king's court with a horde of other women trying to become his new wife. Now, the backdrop of the story, what's going on, is there's a person in power who wants to destroy the Israelites, who are also in captivity at this time. So you have somebody who had no idea. She's just this orphan child. She didn't want any of that. I mean, imagine, we say, being a princess, but ultimately her life was called into question. To save her people, she had to risk her own life. That is not a situation she looked for. We don't know what she achieved or what she desired to achieve as an orphan living with her uncle, Mordecai. We don't know if she sat there and she was in his house, his modest house, saying, maybe one day I'll learn how to make bread really good and sell it at the market. Maybe I'll find a husband and he'll get me out of this situation, or maybe something will come up. We don't know what went through her head. Doesn't matter. Like a train wreck, her life was taken over by this crazy situation. So she finds herself in the king's court. Now, her predecessor had just been killed because she said no to the king. So you can imagine this isn't exactly, the princess story that we all hope and dream of in the, Disney fairy tale stuff, ladies. I'm sorry. This is a situation where you have a very set place, you mess up, you might be dead. And so she found herself in a situation where she was really in a bad place. But she trusted in God. And her trust in God and her trust in her uncle Mordecai wound up saving her entire Israelite group. Her little bit of faith. And so I guess my point is there's going to be times in your life where there's going to be a situation that comes that you didn't want any business with, you didn't want any part of. And it's really easy to be the disciples on the boat, or to be Esther, and to have that moment of doubt and say, I really didn't see this going this way. I was really okay with just getting out on the boat and fishing today, or just ferrying you to the other side, Jesus. Why did we have to have this storm? Or, things were nice in the house. Like, it wasn't really that scary. And now I'm sitting here walking to the king's court, getting ready to do something that if he's not in a good mood means that he's going to have me killed. Sometimes you're going to find yourself in situations that are similar. I know that it might seem crazy, but it's part of life. And that's one of the troubles that you'll come. But I want to encourage you here. Proverbs 3 verses 5 through 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not onto your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." So even though things come up that don't make sense or scare you like crazy, we know that if we can trust in God, and if we can let him lead, that even when we're in a weird situation, that he's going to deliver us. Another verse to kind of go along with the Esther story, Psalms 9 and 10. "Those who know your name trust in me, for you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you." We move on to the second point. Trouble that is meant to test you. Now, it's hard not to go, I actually had a little bit of a hard time thinking about times in my life when I was tested, and I think that's because God already pulled me through them. But I go back to right after I got out of high school. So a little bit into myself, and this is not to lift me up or whatever. This is kind of to tell you my mental state at that time. So when I was a senior in high school, I wasn't the smartest kid in the school. I wasn't. But I had other things that I could do that I felt like would sell myself to a nice college or whatever. And I didn't want to go to Southern. Sorry for those who did. Nothing wrong with you guys for going to Southern. I wanted to go somewhere nice. Where I could do different things, because I knew I didn't want to be a doctor because I'm scared of blood and guts. I didn't want to be a teacher because I thought I'd be poor. I didn't, whatever. We could keep going. But through a series of events, we had a guy come on campus at Pisgah, and he was the recruiter for Walla Walla. At the time, I was the captain of the gymnastics team. I know that things have changed, but I was the captain of the gymnastics team. And their team had kind of shut down. Like the West Coast, they don't do as much as the East Coast does with gymnastics in the Adventist world. We call it active sports. So I was offered, as a freshman, the opportunity to go out there and be a freshman coach. They were going to give me an amount of money that I could spend on any trip that I wanted to do. They had all the equipment they needed. I was going to pick my team. I was going to pick my staff. And all I was going to have was a chaperone to make sure I didn't get too crazy as a freshman. So I was given that opportunity. And a weird thing happened. I was going to the Kernersville Church at that time. And the assistant pastor at the Kernersville Church, he said, "Luke, I don't think you should go to Walla Walla." "You don't think I should go to Walla Walla?" "But they offered me a coaching job. That's my dream. I could take us on trips. We could go to exotic places because they're letting me, a freshman, decide where we go, which is really dumb." And so, I was thinking, all right, we're going to go to Bermuda, we're going to go to Aruba, And he said, "Luke, I don't think you should go. Actually, I think that you should be a part of a church plant." Now, at the time, I was like, "That's weird, dude. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what a church plant is or why anybody would want to be a part of one." Walla Walla. They have onions that I don't like, but apparently they're famous. I might give them a shot. So he threw that on me. And you see, there was something that happened, and it wound up that I couldn't go to a nice college. I had to go to Forsyth Tech. So I was being tested because I had done everything I could. I was in every extracurricular organization that would allow me to be in, some of which made additional, lines that said it was okay for me to be there, even though I was in other organizations. So I was on the student association, I was class president, I was captain of the gymnastics team, I was on the traveling choir, I was a prayer group leader, I was the head RA in the dorm. And so I was like, I'm gonna look great on an application. And no, I think you should be part of a church plant. That church plant didn't work out. Forsyth Tech was terrible. It was a rough time for me because I had high expectations and it didn't pull through. So my expectations were just thrown across the ground. Everything I wanted to do, I was so depressed. Had I gone to Walla Walla, though, I wouldn't be standing up here at Triad Adventist Church telling you guys, Triad Adventist Fellowship, excuse me, we're not a church yet. I wouldn't be telling you guys, about a message or about this story. My life would be completely different. I probably wouldn't have met Elizabeth, and, it was a test, and it was something that was a really rough time in my life. But I praise God that, that test came. So there's stories in the Bible. Obviously, I'm going to talk about Job. There's stories in the Bible where we are tested as people. And as human beings, I ask you to, as trouble comes into your life, test it. See what it is. Is it something you caused? Is it something that, maybe God's sending to test you? Or is it just something that you were in the wrong place at the wrong time? And sometimes those lines can be gray, and it can go over. But we look at the story of Job. I'm not going to spend time with Job. Job's got a ton of chapters. It ends in the 40s, so we're not going to tell the whole story of Job. But here's the cliff notes. Here's this guy who has a lot of money. He has a lot of stuff. He's got everything that anybody at that time could want, everything we could attain on this earth. And back then, children were really valuable. You wanted to have a lot of children. He had a lot of children. This guy had everything he wanted. And then, something happened. Satan took notice of that. And Satan goes to God and says, the only reason that Job even likes you, man, is because you give him all this stuff. Take all that stuff away and see how long it takes for Job to be like, I hate you, God. God says, fine. You can do what you want to this guy, just don't kill him. That's where it gets really rough for Job. So Job sees a servant coming off in the distance. Hey, what's going on? Mishael, or whatever his name is, Oh, it's really bad. Lots of stuff died. It's bad. Oh, well, that's terrible. Before he's done talking, another guy comes. And he's like, oh, by the way, all of your kids died in the house. The storm came and it just knocked down the house. They're all dead. And before he's done, there were these raiders that came and they took out all of your livestock. And you kind of get the cycle. It continues until everything that Job had is gone. The dude's breaking out in all sorts of skin disease. It gets to the point where his own wife comes and says, hey man, I think the best thing you could do at this point is curse God and die. Job stayed true. Job didn't curse God. I think it's safe to say I would have cursed God and died. That's just me. But the story of Job is there to remind us that even when we are tested, cursing God's not the right answer. And if you go to the very end, we're skipping 42 chapters. And we're going to chapter 42, verse 10. So a little pregame before that. So God had finally told Job's friends who came to visit him, and they were like, man, you must have really messed up to be in this situation. What'd you do? And so finally, it gets to this point, and God has redeemed Job. And God comes to Job and says, hey, the only way I'm going to let your friends off is if you say a prayer for them. And so we pick up in verse 42. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had had before. Now, I always struggle with this because I'm like, well, if you love your kids and the kids are dead, like, how do you get that recovered? That's a whole other topic. So moving right along, we go to another story. This one's found in Daniel 3. This is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with this story, but it's also one of faith. So here you have these guys who became eunuchs. If you don't know what a eunuch is, I'm not going to tell you. You can look it up or talk to your parents or whatever. Who became eunuchs. They had been captured from their country. They had been taken to Babylon. They served King Nebuchadnezzar. And it got to a point where this guy, the king, was so into himself that he had built a massive, massive, massive statue of himself in gold. And he got everybody together and he said, hey everybody, let's get together. You bow down when the music plays and you worship the statue of me, because that's cool. That's what everybody's doing. So you have these three guys who come out and they say, we're not going to do that because we serve the one true God. Now, I've heard several sermons. It would be really easy. It would have been really easy for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to fix their sandal. When the music played, it just so happened. And I'm sure there's a number of people who did that because they were the only three that were eventually thrown into a fiery furnace. So imagine that for a second. You've done everything right. You achieve greatness in this court. You become someone of prominence to the point that you're, present at these things. The king goes to you for advice. You wake up, you go, you see the statue, and now you have an ultimatum. You bow down and worship the statue, or you die and you give up everything you have. You die dishonorably in a fire in front of everybody, which obviously would not be very painless. So, they're being tested. It's pretty obvious. It's something that, life or death at that moment. I think back to the story of Columbine with the young lady who was asked if she believed in God. And that was the last thing that she ever said. So sometimes in life, unfortunately, it's that dire. You can go from having a normal day at school or having a normal day in the office of Nebuchadnezzar to, hey, do this or you die. So, long story short, they didn't bow down, and they were thrown into the fiery furnace, but they lived. And the king looks into the furnace, and he sees a fourth person in there. There was only three of them. And he, through a series of events that followed after that, Nebuchadnezzar started to give his life to Christ in a way. And so I guess my point is even in the fear of death, they didn't give in to the test. They went through, and ultimately it resulted in them changing the mind of a man who was so set on himself that he built an altar of gold to himself that was very, very tall. So, what are some verses we can get out of this? So, I think about Hebrews 13, 5 through 6. Keep your lives free from a love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. So we can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? And that's some faith that I ascribe to one day have, but I honestly would tell you I probably don't have that yet. Moving right along. So, we've talked about two kinds of trouble. We've talked about trouble that comes to you, trouble that is meant to test you. Now, finally, we get to the juicy one. Trouble you yourself cause. Now, this one's a little personal, and it's a little rough, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. So, when I was a kid, there was a kid I didn't like, and he happened to share the last name of someone who lived in an adjacent neighborhood to me. So, in my 6 or 7-year-old mental aptitude and logic, I decided that the best thing I could do to get back to this kid was TP this fort in this person's backyard, because obviously that person had the same last name as him, so they were probably the same family. So I was going to get this kid. Turns out that in America, there's a lot of people who share the same last name. So that was just vandalism. Luckily, I was really young and really dumb. But anyways, so me and a couple friends go through the whole thing, and we had completely TP'd this poor lady's old fort of her kid who was grown up, and I felt terrible. Of course, I told my parents about it, who they're like, "What did we do wrong? Like, who are you?" And so we immediately marched to this lady's house, and next thing I knew, I was cleaning and doing stuff for her. Not my best moment. But sometimes you put yourself in trouble, and there are consequences to those actions. But God still redeems, and God still loves you, even if you cause the trouble yourself, even if it wasn't a test, even if it wasn't just you were at the wrong place at the wrong time. If you were the cause of that trouble, God still loves you, and God's still going to work through it. So as it turns out with Mrs. Pearl, I ultimately became friends with her, and every time I saw her, it was a nice situation. It actually broke the ice, as it were, for us. And whenever I would see her in the neighborhood, she was always happy to see me, because she realized that that was just a really dumb moment in my life. But there's some stories in the Bible. where people have done some dumb things, and God still works through it. So, of course, we're gonna touch on David. So the story of David and Bathsheba, right? If you're not familiar with it, it could be on TV, it could be a telenovela, because it's full of drama and intrigue. So anyways, you have David, he's the king of God's nation, Israel, and he's done all this stuff, he's usurped the throne very peacefully, I might add, in the sense that he didn't kill the previous guy, even though that might have been the best call at some point, some would argue. He had plenty of opportunity. And so he's achieved this level of kingdom, and it's a time where things are going good. His armies are off at war, but he's in the castle, and so he's taking a stroll out, and he looks off in the distance, and he sees a beautiful naked woman taking a bath on the roof. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going to take a bath on the roof, but whatever. She's taking a bath on the roof. And so he sees her and he's like, I like you and I want you. And so he sends a servant. I can only imagine what that poor servant was thinking. What a good idea, king. As he's going to get Bathsheba. Well, it turns out Bathsheba gets pregnant, and that's bad, and it became worse because it turns out that Bathsheba's husband was in the army, and not only was he in the army of David, but he was a super faithful guy. And so David's like, all right, man, I really messed this up. Like grand royally. So how am I going to fix this? I know. I'll call him back from the front lines, try to talk him into sleeping with his wife, and then maybe the pregnancy, they'll just think that it was him instead of me. Yeah, that's a good idea. And so he calls this guy back, and he's like, all right, this is going to be awesome. And the guy comes, and the guy stays in the castle. He sleeps on the floor. He's like, what are you doing on the floor, man? You're supposed to, go back to your wife. What are you doing? And the guy's like, no, I can't go back to my wife right now. Oh, my brothers in arms are out in the fields. They're sleeping in tents. Their situation is terrible. How can I go back to my wife? That would just be messed up. Okay. Let's get him really drunk. Maybe then he'll go back to his wife. So David tries to get the guy drunk, hoping that this is going to work out. Doesn't work out. All right, plan B. So after all that didn't work, he's got this lady who's pregnant. Her husband's here, sleeping in his castle, not going back to her. Gotta kill him. So David calls in the generals or whatever and says, hey man, what I need you to do is put this guy on the front lines, push him out kind of deal, then withdraw and let him die. Okay, doesn't sound really nice or smart, but okay, sure, you the boss. So long story short, that's what happens. Bathsheba's poor husband is put on the front lines, is cut down, and everything seems good, right? So a prophet comes to David and says, hey, so here's this story. There's this guy this rich man who comes in, and he takes this poor guy's sheep and kills the rich man kind of deal. And David's like, what would you do with that guy? And David's like, well, I'd kill him. That person is you. So with David, he's now mourning. He's freaking out. It's been a rough time. He's mourning. He's having a hard time with this. He's praying to God, please forgive, please forgive. And ultimately, even in all of that, there's a punishment that's dished out. Your baby won't live from that situation that you created. And in addition, your sons will kill each other. Sounds pretty harsh. Sounds pretty rough. Not that what he did wasn't rough and terrible, but, there was a punishment. But there was also redemption. Turns out that Bathsheba's son became Solomon. Solomon was a king later on, and Solomon was the wisest man who ever lived. So even from that terrible situation, God came in, fixed it. So even if you get yourself into a crazy situation like that, there's still mercy, and there is still God's love, and He can restore you. So we move on to one of our last stories. You can find this one in John 8, verses 2 through 11. So at dawn, he, Jesus, appeared at the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law of Moses commands that we stone such a woman. Now what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who had heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Who are those who have condemned you?" And she said, "No one, sir." "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." So this woman had obviously decided that her life had taken a turn, and that the best course of action was to sleep around. And so imagine being her, and the culmination of your trial lines up with you meeting Jesus face to face. And you see the people who obviously set you up come in one by one with the completely don't care about your life at all. And some accounts say that, it was probably one of them that wound up, committing that act with her. And so you're sitting here, standing in front of Jesus, naked by the way, and you are completely redeemed, even though you've lived this sin. Now, did Jesus say, "You know what, sister, you've just been doing it wrong. You see, you shouldn't have been going to the priest and all that. Really, there's a great market over here. What you want to do is you want to go to Cana because you won't get in so much trouble over there." No. He said, "Go and sin no more." So even if you put yourself in a situation like that, even if you're in a situation that you chose that was wrong, that was bad, and obviously it doesn't have to be adultery, plug it in whatever you need to plug in there. Even if you put yourself in a situation like that, it's not the end of the road. In fact, sometimes Jesus will stand guard before you, and instead of letting you be stoned to death, he'll just remind you of all the things that other people have done. And how even this thing that seems so high and so important doesn't matter at all to him. His only desire was that you stop and you go on to a better life. So, my point in all of this is, I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done, or how you got to church, or if you're not really a part of church and someone just dragged you here. Nobody in this building, nobody online, is in any way, shape, or form free of trouble. Every last one of you probably has some skeletons in your closet you're not proud of. But the beauty is that God doesn't care about that. Now, he's not saying continue living a life like that. Continue putting yourself in that situation. Not at all. Go and sin no more was very much the end of that. Go and sin no more. But I guess my point is you can come to church and be completely imperfect, and God is happy to have you there. So I want to leave you with four verses of encouragement. I'm going to start in James 1, verses 2 through 7. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe. And do not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. The person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do." 1 Corinthians 10:13. "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man." Let's say that one again. "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape, that you may be able to endure it." Matthew 11:28-30. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart. You will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And finally, And this one's important. John 16, verses 33. I have told you these things, this is God speaking, Jesus, so that in me you will have peace. In this world you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. There's nothing you take from this sermon at all. Just know that the whole reason Christ came down to earth was to show you that, yes, you're going to have trouble in your life. But I came here to show you how to get through it. As long as you keep your eyes on Christ, as long as when you're in that storm and everything seems completely out of control and everything inside of you that you've ever been taught says, I'm going to die. Look at the guy that's over there laying down, asleep, relaxed, because he knows who's in control. And at any moment, and it won't be when you want it always, he can stand up and say, peace be still. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for these wonderful people, Lord. Thank you for this church. Thank you for all the things that you've done for us, Lord, and all the ways you continue to lead and guide us. Be with us. Help us to grow and mature into people that you've made us to be, Lord. Help us be your hands and feet, Lord, and uplift those who don't feel worthy to be here or to be a part of anything, Lord. Show them your love. Remind them of these stories of people who were imperfect, who had imperfections, who were put in crazy situations and navigated through those situations with your help and did great things. God, help us to know that our story is not over, but it has only begun, and that you are working in each and every one of our lives today. Lord, I ask that you be with this church, send your Holy Spirit to infuse them. Be with our problems, be with our troubles. Help us to keep our eyes on you, and to never, ever forget who is in charge and who controls this world, Lord. Lead us and guide us, bless us and keep us. These things I pray in Christ's holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning, everybody. Now, just a couple of announcements. First of all, the high schoolers, high school age, they've got a new group that meets 10:15 Saturday mornings right over at the Outreach Center. So if you're high school age, you've got kids that are, send them over there. It's going to be a great time of study and fellowship. Every Sabbath morning is going to start at the Outreach Center 10:15. Also, we've got our own Hannah Job that's going to be heading off for her semester here to do some work and some missions work, and so we want to help and support her. There's a way that you can do that. You're going to be able to donate. You're able to donate online to that effort to help her out. As a matter of fact, I put a note in my phone that we're going to post that to the TAC Facebook page this afternoon, so it'll be easy and accessible for you to do. If you get the emails, you would have seen that link yesterday as well. But help her out. This is a great opportunity for her, and obviously for those she's going to minister to. We've got food out in the lobby, a baked potato bar. My wife is very excited, so I'm going to keep this real short. Just one last reminder, and that is that we want you to check in. We're providing 14 meals for hungry children in our area for every check-in. And the summer is a special time as needed. School's wrapped up here in our area now, some cases for a week or two, but most recently, at least the ones that are around me, just this past week. And unfortunately, those kids who get low or no-cost meals during that time, when the school year ends, they don't. So they're in more need than ever. So all you got to do is check in. We'll take care of the rest. If you would, go ahead and bow your heads with me. We're going to pray for the food and for the tithes and offerings we're going to collect. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the blessings that you give us, Lord, for you being the steady rock during our trouble. We pray for the food. We thank you for the hands that have prepared it. Lord, we look forward to the fellowship. And Lord, we pray that the tithes and offerings that we give to you freely today would go to further your work. In Jesus' name, amen.
One day when heaven was filled with His presence, one day when sin was as black as could be, Jesus came for me. The The word became flesh and the light shines among us. His glory revealed, living in love, dying in safety, buried in carrying my sins far away, rising in justified, freely forever. One day is coming, oh glorious day, oh glorious day. One day the morning of Calvary's mountain, one day the morning down to suffering and despising rejected, bearing our sins like hands that heal nations, stretched out on a tree, and took the nails for me, living in love, dying in safety, buried in carrying my sins far away, rising in justified, living forever. One day is coming, oh glorious day, oh glorious day. One day you'll be good, and sin no longer. One day the storms will away from the door. Then I'll rise over death he had conquered. Now he's ascended, my Lord. Death is not holding, the grave is not keeping, and rising again, living in love, dying in safety, buried in carrying my sins far away, rising in justified, freely forever. One day is coming, oh glorious day, oh glorious day, oh glorious day. One day the trumpet will sound, for it's coming. One day the skies with His glories will shine. One look away, my beloved one, bringing my Savior Jesus is mine. Living in love, dying in safety, buried in carrying my sins far away, rising in justified, freely forever. One day is coming, oh glorious day, oh glorious day, glorious day, oh glorious day. Thank you for joining us this morning. Like Chris was saying, there is lunch in the lobby. Everyone have a happy Sabbath. Thank you again. Before the world was made, before you spoke it to me, you were the king of kings. Yeah, you were, and now you're reigning still. Forever above all things, your presence is fire. Forever majesty, glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. Glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. Creator God, you did, we bless your wonderful name. Your great and matchless name. All my days, no life I hold like you. No blessing not for me. No life that shouts and sings the greatness of our King. Glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. Glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. Take my life and let it be all for you and for your glory. Take my life and let it be yours. Take my life and let it be all for you and for your glory. Take my life and let it be yours. We sing glory to God, glory to God forever. Glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. We sing glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. We sing glory to God, glory to God, glory to God forever. Take my life and let it be all for you and for your glory. Take my life and let it be yours. Take my life and let it be all for you and for your glory. Take my life and let it be yours. We sing glory to God, glory